Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings here in Mendham. Anyway, so economics video, I guess. Just something different. Throw it in. It's really hard to talk about any kind of social issue, just because civilization is mostly just idiots on the right and idiots on the left, and there's just no sense of any responsibility to construct reasonable proposals. Something that's actually going to fix something that's broken. So it is sort of a waste of time. Second, I have been talking in the past about the economy, and my prediction was it wasn't going to last, 15 months. And it has been able to be propped up and maintained in this idiotic circumstance for decades, frankly. And so my predictive power, is, doubtable. But the fact is, I'm saying what goes up will come down kind of thing, because it's all made out of air. It's just all fake. There's no real economic anything anymore. In terms of it's all propped up, however you want to describe that. It's all balloons, and they can't keep pumping air into them without them eventually blowing up. So I could do the basic facts thing, like the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, basically, the idea is to take all the banks' vault money and keep it in one place, nice and safe. And then when you have to do exchanges between the bank, like Bank A writes a check and Bank C is the one that cashes it, it's very easy to just exchange the money in different accounts, and it's all very efficient. And then in 2000 something, they decided, it was earlier than that. No, it was around there. Anyway, they decided, that they could do this gimmick, where they buy their own bonds essentially with bank checks, and they just pretend that the bond is cash in the vault. So instead of the banks having cash in their vault, they have IOUs from the government, bonds. And so now there's $6 trillion of that in the vault, that the banks bought the bonds, with their money, so to speak, their checks, and they just never cashed the check. So in a sense, the government just bought its own bonds off the market and pretended they're going to use it as bank collateral of some kind. But it's clearly not collateral. It's clearly not a real asset. The bank can't give it to customers. Say, oh, you want $5? Well, here's $5 worth of bond money. That's not going to work. You can cash it in 10 years. So it's all, there's this much real, bank assets, and the rest, 99% of the money in the Fed, the bank's money, is IOUs from the federal government. So $6 trillion worth. The real assets are like one trillion. Well, it's even less than that. The real bank's vault money is less than $1 trillion. The bond money is $6 trillion. All right, then the FDIC insurance, right? This thing that's supposed to protect us from the run on the bank when the bank goes bust. There's this insurance money. They're going to save the day. Well, they have $100 billion in the fund, and it's insuring $7 trillion. So there's no hope, that you're going to get in the line fast enough to have your insured capital. So there was a phrase invented in 2009 that's when they really started doing this thing, where they bought $5 trillion they put $5 trillion of bonds in the bank's reserve accounts. But anyway, so that was the scheme to finance the junk bonds that had to be saved to keep the rich from becoming poor. They propped it up with the FDIC insurance by guaranteeing a bunch of stocks that weren't worth anything just to prevent the stock market from crashing. So the only way to keep the crash from happening was to make all the bad stocks good stocks. Yeah, so that's what they did. They guaranteed them all. They just said, don't sell them because we'll buy them from you in the future, okay, for their book value. So just, even though the company, so to speak, it was all a bunch of mortgage debt, but even though the company is bankrupt, we're going to give you the money for the stock. You just can't get it today. And so that was the racket. So obviously there's no FDIC insurance. So all of this stuff, like say the bank fails, that is, it's when it's collateralized isn't worth anything, okay, and it gave away a bunch of money. So now it has no assets and no money. And so it can't give people back their assets because it doesn't have any real ones. Okay, it just has a bunch of fake bonds and IOUs and other crap, junk bonds that aren't worth anything, really worth anything. So what happens is then the banks are going to say to the government, give me the money for the bonds. But the government can't give the bank $6 trillion. Okay, it only takes in $2 trillion a year. Obviously can't give it $6 trillion, so obviously that's not going to work. And obviously the FDI insurance can't cover it, so there's no coverage. All right, the assets can't be paid unless the government prints the cash. So everybody thinks, not everybody, a bunch of the right wingers, they all think the Fed is doing, the Fed, they're printing money. They're not printing money, they're printing debt. And the mystic is finally conceding that, at least he says the words, that there's a difference between cash and debt. Okay, bonds and cash, they're not the same thing. So the government has printed cash, but it's it's a reasonable curve. There's only $2.4 trillion in circulation. That's all the cash, all the money in the whole world is, American currency is only $2.4 trillion. So, compared to the $6 trillion in the Fed, it's not much. Compared to the $7 trillion insured, it's not that much. Compared to the $40 trillion of past debt, it's not so bad, right? So the amount of cash is pretty tiny compared to. And obviously to pay all these gigantic debts, $40 trillion, you can understand that, well, they're going to have to print an awful lot of cash, more than there is now. So if there's $2.4 trillion and they have to pay $40 trillion, you can understand they're going to have to keep doubling the amount of currency and doubling. And obviously every time they print an extra dollar, it means the dollars you have are less valuable. So that's the inflation part. And that experiment has been done over and over in, from like the 1800s, from 1800 to 1950, there was a whole bunch of crashes all over the world created by exactly that phenomenon. They started printing cash and devaluing the currency, and that's why the original Japanese yen is worth whatever 2 million pennies. Yeah, I mean it's worth 1/1,000,000th of its original value. Just crazy stuff like that happened. That's the threat, is that all this borrowed money. Now the real trick of the borrowed money is what the rich people do. So this is why the rich are so dangerous and ugly and disgusting, is they collateralize all their assets. So that means they can go to a bank and say, here's a bond, a U.S. bond, see, I bought it. And the bank will give them a loan. And the bank will accept, the bond pays 3%, the bank will say, give me an extra 0.5%, okay. And that's what they'll pay as a premium on the loan. So they can basically own the asset and take the money that the asset is worth and invest it in the stock market and make 10% a year. So that's the great racket they have, is that they can collateralize all their assets. See, you can't go to the bank with your receipt from Home Depot for your refrigerator, and say, hey, give me, I paid $5,000 for this stupid refrigerator. Can you give me, you can own it if you want to, okay? I mean, I'll use it and you can own it, okay? And you give me the money. and then I can go out and buy stocks with the money. You know, I can go buy some more stuff with the money of my collateralized refrigerator. The regular people can't do that, so but the rich can. So they can get all the money they want, and you know, that's the scam, is they can borrow a ton of money. So Google even does this. You know, Google has a ton of money, but what it does is just collateralizes its assets and borrows more money to invest in buying other companies and, you know, making huge profits, because yeah, for every 3 that fail, one or two is a huge success. So they just keep making money, and they destroy all their competition, of course. All right, so that's the basic diagram of the disaster. So all you need is there to be enough of a decline in the economy, enough of a decline in the stock market, and then all of a sudden, all those loans can't be paid back. The bank is stuck with assets that are valueless because nobody's going to buy a bond when the economy's crashing. So they can't sell the damn thing. So yes, that's the failure, and then the government has to fix the failure, but it can't because the failure is so big, and it doesn't have any assets. It doesn't have anything to hand people that's worth anything, you know, except cash, and so it prints it. And that's, you know, I don't think any economy ever wanted to print cash, but they had to because they didn't have a choice. And the fact is, we've destroyed all the things that would have given us the choice, so we don't have choices anymore. And the government will be, it'll have no other option. It has to pay the Social Security, it has to pay this, it has to pay the Medicare, it has to pay the doctors, it has to pay all, and it will have to print the money to do it. All right, and so again, the rich really do own everything because they own that trillions of dollars of IOUs from the government. You know, it's just a gigantic amount of currency. They could buy every house in America 3 or 4 times over. Yeah, so anyway, so the housing crisis, the bubble, we're doing it all over again. People are buying houses with, you know, 58 cents down. It's just ridiculous. Obviously, all these people run away from those mortgages as soon as the housing prices go down. They're not going to want to, you know, they're not going to pay a gigantic premium to own an asset that's half the value. So, you know, they're just walking right into the same 2009 disaster, and they won't be able to use the same gimmicks. So I don't know if there's some new gimmick they can invent, but I can't imagine what it would be, frankly. I mean, you just can't do this fake, phony, you know, bond money thing forever, and especially if there's a real run on the banks, you know, where people start really panicking. But there's not that many people who have any assets in the bank, right? The majority of people are hand to mouth, you know, so it's only this tiny portion of the population who is responsible and actually has more assets, real assets, okay, than they have debt. Yeah, so they're the only ones going to get crushed, you know, and everybody else just runs away. But anyway, obviously there won't be any pie to give anybody, so everybody's going to be unhappy because nobody's going to get any pie. You know, there's so little pie and so many hands or tickets saying I'm entitled to a piece of pie. Something like that. So anyway, my whole argument is that, you know, the mystics are going to talk about capitalism versus give everybody everythingism. And the big complaint about give everybody everythingism is that it's completely void of any logic about the fact that we have to have incentives to work. Work is unpleasant, you know, by its nature. And generally speaking, there's not too many jobs that are fun. Most of the jobs suck. And the ones that are really important, yeah, they're work, you know. They might not suck. They might not be horrible, like picking up garbage or something, you know, smelling that truck all day. But they are still going to be bad. They're still going to be, you know, you got to climb the pole and, you know, glue the wires together and all that kind of crap. And so people have to have an incentive to do all that stuff. So if you give them enough for doing nothing, then they'll take the nothing and accept a life of nothing because it's good enough. It's almost like you can't make prison too comfortable, or yeah, there's a bunch of people who say, well, it beats homelessness, so why not go for it? You know, so you know, it's just a fact. You know that people have a reward and punishment is the way the system works. So you can't have a productive society unless you have some incentive for people to be more productive. You know, they can't just sit and eat potato chips and watch TV all day and then say that your civilization is expanding and growing and becoming productive and doing all. No, it's not going to be doing any of that stuff. It'll do nothing. So you have to have some sort of incentive to improve your condition, and the improvement has to be substantial enough to mean something. All right, so yes, you need some sort of motivator. All right, and it doesn't have to be much, you know, just a house that's twice as big or something, you know, a new car instead of a used car, some incentive to do something productive. And then you can understand it just on a scale basis that, you know, economies can't work by barter. We can't all exchange old toaster. I trade my toaster. I have an extra toaster. You give me your blender or some kind. You can't be wasting time doing that nonsense. So you do need currency. You need some kind of exchange currency to make all of that more efficient. And it needs to be secure and, you know, invulnerable to printing the cash, you know, changing how much of the asset exists. You can't do that. You can't make more paintings and then sell them for the same high price. I mean, it's just that obvious. You can't make twice as much wheat in the world and then expect to get the same amount of money for a bag of it. You're not going to get the same money for a bag of it. You know. So I have termed, you know, the term incentive economics. So instead of using something like capitalism or socialism, you just use incentive economics. You just sit there and realize that, yes, people need to be incentivized to be constructive participants in civilization and to try to help build, you know, things. Make houses, make roads, make water systems, make generators, make all that stuff needs all of us to contribute. And so we can, you know, we don't have to contribute by walking there and, you know, drilling holes in the ground or something. We contribute by earning some cash and making our contribution to the project. And then once you have the project, the big dam project, the big this, the big that, you all can live for decades on the value you've created. That's how it works. You build the brick house and, you know, it lasts for a couple hundred years, and, you know, it's all civil. It civilizes everybody's existence to have these assets, and we all have to have incentive to be willing to participate. Now, obviously, the whole economic thing got ruined because there's a bunch of businesses that should never exist. So there's a bunch of big businesses selling pink salt or, you know, some other voodoo. You know, everybody wants to be an independent entrepreneur and come up with some silly gimmick that they can sucker people to buy. So, you know, there's a ton of, you know, all the people with all the engineering all kinds of schemes, like you buy the gift card and most people don't cash it in so we can make a profit, and, you know, all the rackets and the schemes, you know, all the money spent on trying to get you to buy something, and, you know, the commercials, all that stuff. It's all a huge waste of human resources, and it's really, really inefficient. And so that's the joke of capitalism. It creates all this inefficiency, and then it creates things like Google, you know, where the company, you know, as a strategy, destroys all the competition because they have a bunch of venture capital and they can afford to lose a few $1 million a year. And so all the other companies have to make profits because they have to pay their employees. But the venture capitalist company now will pay them out of a bunch of venture capital, so we can just destroy all the competition and then we can take over the market. That's exactly what Google did. It's, you know, right out of the William Randolph Hearst playbook. It's, you know, you could just go watch the movie, True Grit, whatever the fuck it's called. Rosebud, what the hell is it called? Citizen Kane. You can go watch the movie, and it's a blueprint of this strategy, to take over the newspaper industry, So he basically said, yeah, I can lose $2 million for 100 years. That's how rich he was. And so, yeah, I don't care how long it takes, but everybody else is going to be out of business because I'm going to give it all away for free. There's going to be like coupons in my paper for, free papers. It's just, and it works. It works. That's how you can create a monopoly and make a ton of money by just making it impossible for somebody to compete with you. You're so big that if they try, you can afford to lose money for 5 years and wipe them out. So if a company gets too big, there's no way to compete with it because it'll buy anything that looks like a legitimate competitor and just buy them out of business. So that also happened in the search industry. All of the search technologies were all bought and never used again. So it was just destroy it, destroy the technology. And capitalism does this. I mean, the flip camera, that was so popular, so everything. And a company bought Flip just so they could destroy it, just so they could use it as a tax write-off. And so all the technology, all the value, just thrown away. So a company could write it off their taxes. I mean, that's the economy we've created, or we're accepting, and it's a garbage economy. So even all the silly competition is so wasteful. Companies buy the buildings, they make a building, they rent this, they do all this stuff to try to compete with each other, and all it ends up being is a huge waste because they fight with each other and then weaken each other. And in the end, there's no value created because the cost of doing business is you have to do this silly competition with these other companies and do all this. Create your own delivery system and create this and create that, create all this infrastructure, this overhead, because that's what the other company's doing. Because Walmart has this in China and it has this and it has that. And well, then now you have to put your plants in China. And now you have to do whatever they did to gain these little efficiencies to be able to compete. And it's just corrosive and destructive in the end. All right, so the big statement I have made is that it wouldn't matter. So all the inefficiencies of capitalism could be accepted and wouldn't do us any harm if we would just get rid of the inheritance. So if company ownership couldn't be inherited, then you wouldn't have to worry about it because all the assets would go back on the market. Somebody would have to buy them with real earned money, like they had to go out and earn the money and not inherit it. And so it would all be owned by people who earned it, not people who didn't. And it wouldn't be legacy. So it's like current capitalism with inheritance is just nobility. It's just a monarchy all over again. You're just not calling it a monarchy, but it's a monarchy. It's a genetically controlled packet of wealth that is never that only disappears or goes back into the economy if the owner is a moron, like Trump. So if Trump didn't run for president, he would have, he was heading right for a serious bankruptcy because he didn't have any real assets. He just had debts. Okay, and the banks weren't collecting the debts because they knew they can't. That was the only reason. He can't pay them. He'd have to go bankrupt, and he doesn't have any. There's nothing left over. After he goes through his bankruptcy, there's nothing left over. Nobody gets paid anything because there's nothing there. And that was the truth. And it's just disgusting that they make him an icon for earning it, and he didn't earn any of it, and he lost it all, frankly. And now it's all gimmick money. I'll make a Bitcoin racket. I'll get into all kinds of rackets. They're just, they're fluff. He doesn't make anything real. He doesn't make anything of value. He doesn't make electrical plants or something. He doesn't make anything useful. So that's what you get with inheritance. Is just a tax for these useless people that don't do anything except suck the blood of the company. So the fact is we could just have companies and just, you know, the government, we don't say the government owns the company, we just say nobody owns the company. Okay, it's just a company, and the fact is that we elect, you know, the consumers and the workers, you know, have a balance between those two and allow them to elect somebody to run the company. And you don't need to pay them $468 million a year, obviously. You know, there's still good reason to do that. There's lots of little smart college kids that will do just fine. And the fact is, you know, for a couple $100,000, they can, you know, figure out who to employ, what engineers they need, what research and development they should do, figure out how to run the company in a decent manner, and you don't have to pay any premiums to owners. And so companies could be completely self-sufficient machines with nobody owning them, nobody demanding a profit to be pulled out of them. And, you know, that would be, in my opinion, a solution to this capitalism problem, is just take away this right of ownership, because the right of ownership is what just creates this wealth problem. And the legacy wealth is the real horror, because it never goes back into the system. And you need to put the assets back on the market. If people are allowed to just keep acquiring more and more and more assets, that's the inflation. You know, because they're only using them to suck the blood out of them, to suck a privileged, expensive, luxury life out of them. So it's just a huge amount of wasted labor and wasted work on a tiny percentage of the human population with this insane high maintenance gluttony, and it's costing you half the value of your salary. You know, half the value of what you've earned is being consumed, okay, at their dinner table, and that's bullshit. So, you know, there's no reason why doctors, you know, people who've done hard work, invested in their knowledge and understanding and skills, shouldn't be paid more. You know, this whole idea that socialism is moronic. Obviously, people have different value to an economy, to a civilization, and they largely have that more value because they put more value in. They did more work to acquire that, and that's earning it, and that's what should get rewarded. Merit pay. All right, now that was a bad term when Republicans say it, but I'm saying it's a damn good concept. We all should be paid based on our merit. Now, I'm not arguing that there's lots of people who are just fucking dysfunctional. All right, they did too many drugs, they did this, they were too lazy as kids, whatever, they're useless. I'm not suggesting you shoot them, but yeah, those are the ones you give the maintenance to. All right, enough. Bread and water and a little bit extra, you know, something better than homelessness, and you just write that off and try to tell the rest of the society is, you know, please don't raise kids that are morons. Take responsibility for creating human beings and make human beings that have some understanding that they need to be productive, that they need to make a contribution to civilization, that they can't be just parasites. Okay, it's not a good thing. Yeah, but that's all you can do. Some people are going to be born, you know, retarded and shit. Okay, that's tough luck. Try to avoid it, you know, try to do what you can to prevent that from happening. You know, again, be responsible procreators, not irresponsible ones. You know, simple enough statement. And recognize your own responsibility. You create a mess, then maybe you should be working hard to clean it up. You shouldn't be taxing your neighbor to clean up the mess you made. Okay, you make a monster. Why should everybody else have to pay to cage it? That's your responsibility. You know, that kind of speech making should take place somewhere where, you know, it's not some right to make a mess. That's not in the Constitution somewhere. You have a right to be a fucking parasite and make a fucking goddamn mess. You know, that's not one of the Bill of Rights. That should be in the Bill of Wrongs. Maybe we need that. Ooh, that's a good idea. Ooh, yeah, I'm liking that. The Bill of Wrongs. Yeah, okay. Reckless, stupid, wishful thinking, all that, all those should be right in there. You know, we could go right through the list of the amendments in the Bill of Wrongs, and recognize that, you know, you're wrong if you think you're entitled. Okay, you're wrong. You have to earn the entitlement. You can't just say, I'm here, therefore I'm breathing oxygen, I'm a need machine, fulfill my needs. I'm entitled to be fulfilled. Sorry, no, you're not. And maybe you are, in the sense that the parent should be held liable. Okay, so that would be the simple solution, is to make parenthood even more scary, by making it a real social contract that, first you go broke taking care of your kids. We don't have to make the society go broke, So first, if you're going to be a welfare whore or some other kind of crap, well, it's a lifetime liability. You've got a gigantic debt to pay, and it's just a fact, And frankly, the only way to fix those kind of circumstances is there has to be a minimum functionality. If you don't have $500 in the bank, then I wouldn't let you raise a kid. Forget it. You don't have any right to abuse a new living being, a new human being on Earth. And if you don't have any hope of being able to take care of the magnitude of the responsibility and have any of it covered, have any insurance at all, you got no business making babies. That should be in the amendments. That should be in the Bill of Wrongs. People. The fact that we even, the fact that we can't write that down as a, one of those things, a referendum, that people vote on, just to see how many people would actually say, no, people should have a right to have way too many kids that they can't afford. They should be able to force their neighbor to raise their kids and pay for it. So, I mean, most property taxes, like 70% of your property taxes, maybe more, is to finance other people's procreation. It's not to do anything else. It's the extra police, the schools, all of that infrastructure you need to finance the fact that they have retarded kids, they have bad health care, they have all kinds of problems, and somebody else has to pay for it. It's not the parents' problem, it's everybody's problem. And that's just ugly. I'm saying it's wrong. I don't know if it's, what else are you going to do? Because you have to value the children, have to take care of them. But it really isn't, your neighbor's responsibility. It's yours if you're going to be a procreator, and you ought to accept that responsibility. It's just such conniving bullshit. It's like this, look, there's so many gimmicks. There's all tons of people who have, they have a couple $1,000,000 in the bank, and, they own this and that. And what do? They liquidize all their assets so they can, get shoved into some federally financed, nursing home. Gimmicks everywhere. All this slimy, shystery shenanigans, that would be pretty easily, to create a structure where people just can't get away with that. We could do that. We can have a system that doesn't have leeches all over it. We really can extract the leeches and have a civilization that can survive and have some dignity. And it's really not the choice of the right and the left, obviously. Those two choices won't get you there. Just a fact. The problem is people are just selfish bastards. They really can't think that I'm part of a whole system, and, I can't shit in somebody else's water, and I can't do this. And, they just don't think in those terms. They're just saying, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? So that's how they vote. So the rich keep voting what's in it for them, and the poor keep voting what's in it for them, and something rational. There's nobody voting for the rational choice. And so the more we create a society of rich people and poor people, the more it's going to be impossible to have that rational answer, because there just isn't any more rational people. 70s you had a chance because the middle class was this big, and the rich was this big, and the poor were this big. And so you had a chance. But the middle class is doing this, and the rich is doing this, and the poor is doing this. So, idiocracy. All right, now I guess we'll play the video. Yeah, take a break and then I'll play the video. Is there anything else? So I'm just saying, inheritance, huge problem. Just breaks, that's just monarchy. Just forget it. That can't work. You need to have the assets in the hands of people who earn it. You need to have the carrot. There's no carrots in the system. You know, if you allow perpetual ownership, then there's just whip. There's no carrots. And so that's the big, you know. And the other one is that you can't believe that debt doesn't have, that debt isn't going to come back to roost, that it can just disappear and float off into the, you know, the universe, and that somehow it's not going to bounce off anything and come back to blow you up, because it will. All right. So, till later. All right, I'm back. And such. Sometime later. So the mystic, I'll play some of his stuff and just make my little counter arguments, saying, no, exploitation sucks. There's probably got to be a better way to do it than that. Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's give this a shot.
Ripples and...
Yeah, too quiet.
All you're doing is ironing out the system, and the flat system is a dead system. Life is not meant to be fair.
Alright, so that doesn't mean anything. Life is not meant to be fair. We're smart and intelligent organisms. We can find out, you know, we can figure out first the value of fair. Deserve should have something to do with it. We can figure all that out. So it's just silly to, you know, make some kind of statement that somehow the problem is insurmountable. We're just monkeys and we can never be anything better than monkeys, and it's just all nonsense. Obviously a great deal of a large percentage of the population, you could argue, in certain periods of time had a certain ethic and decency and, you know, doing the right thing and all that stuff. And we know that all the crime is committed by a tiny percentage of the recidivism types, the, you know, wretched refuse, and you know, the fact is that a kind of kindness gets in the way of recognizing that you can't be very tolerant of transgressions. But the problem is you end up with, you know, if you're too draconian and you're too nonsensical and you're zero tolerance nonsense, you know, then you start, you know, hanging people for, you know, littering or something. So it does get out of hand and too stupid and all of that. But, you know, we're smart enough to do it right. And people like the mystic just make excuses for people doing it wrong. You know, and that's all there are. They're just excuses. We can do it right. It's not impossible.
What can I say to finish this off? We'll all suffer together. We will all suffer together.
Oh, wait a minute. This is, yeah, we're in the wrong place. We should be back here somewhere. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Never mind.
What we've got now is pretending that everybody is worth the same as everybody else.
So that isn't really what there is. That's only the far, far left, okay, who thinks people don't have to be productive and they don't have to have an incentive to work, and we can have some kind of lazy commune and we can all just sit around, eat potato chips, watch TV, play video games, and somehow civilization will take care of itself. And obviously it won't. We all have to try our best to maintain it and help it. We have to pick up the litter, and we have to do this, and we have to do that, and we have to, you know, try to stop our neighbor from beating his kids and all kinds of stuff that we have to, you know, keep an eye on and attempt to prevent stupid accidents and stupid waste.
And that doesn't give capitalism or money the angle it needs for sliding.
So again, this, whatever this sliding is, you know, that you need some sort of disproportional system, when again the game would be that you merit, you know, and you just simply say that people are worth what they can contribute, and you know, that's fair enough, and you know, and you have to compensate for the fact that some people are just going to be damn unlucky, and so you take care of them too. But it's not that hard to figure out that you don't just create desperation wages and suck the entire life out of people. Have little kids cleaning cement mixers and dying when they're 25. You don't do that kind of crap. Productivity doesn't demand brutality.
For getting motion, for going.
If you just think about all the work that is just waste work because of all the crooks and criminals and shysters and bums that are allowed to corrupt every system, the thieves stealing people's credit cards and this and that and all that other nonsense. And it really is, the fact is you got to have better laws, and you have to have a system where people are willing to be more accountable. Everybody wants to hide, and so they can be burglars, so they can cheat, so they don't want a system that's an accountability system. You could argue that even immigration, before it became the liberal cause, it was a sensible argument to make that we have this system of Social Security numbers. We can keep it as an updated system where your Social Security number says where you live, and it says what some basic details about your existence, and that's essentially your the thing that makes you a credible citizen, your citizen card. And because so many people just didn't want to be they didn't want a paper trail. They didn't want to have any record of their existence so they could do sneaky things. They all ran away from that kind of accountability. Even the internet, you can see. All these fake, fraud, phony accounts all over the place. It's all being run and ruined by a bunch of deception. You can't even do a poll. You can't do anything because the cheaters will cheat it.
Things, it entropyizes. I don't think it's creating what we've got, this civilization of the entire world, the balancing out of non-exploitation of the entire world and peoples, is just entropyized the entire world.
So again, that really isn't saying anything. So again, we don't have to be lowest common denominator. We don't have to go to the worst case. We don't have to compete with stupid and evil, because we can make the rules, and it's pretty simple in my opinion. And one of the obvious rules is, like I said, if I could make a virus that only killed billionaires, and so all the billionaires died tomorrow, you're not going to miss them. They really don't make any valuable contribution. They don't really engineer their products. They really don't do anything. They really don't. They have no value except as parasites. There's no symbiotic relationship. They don't give nearly what they take. And then when you think of all the waste, there's 17 houses and all of the other crap that goes to maintain them, and all their silly decisions, to gold plate the crap. It's just all waste. Their luxury is waste.
And capitalism is exploitation.
Right. And it's used just, to you, that's a big joke word. It doesn't mean anything. That sucks. And again, it really doesn't have to be that way. So companies can be run by executives, not owners, just people who run the company. And they can succeed or fail, keep their job or lose their job. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Money is exploitation, and it works.
So there's nothing wrong with money. There's no corruption in the idea of having some tokens, a commodity that's easily exchanged and that represents the value of all the other commodities. That's tied to all the other commodities in terms of its value, and that works just fine. And the problem is that governments that borrow a lot of money, they are set up for not being able to handle a crisis, because when the crisis hits, everybody's going to want their money, and the government ain't going to have it.
It has been invented. These things were invented to work with a tinted, slanted playing field.
So again, so why should we? So there's no reason for, again, a sophisticated civilization to accept those as some kind of intractable default rules that we must play by. No.
Balance the playing field, and capitalism and money does not work.
Right, so it's just, he's just mocking the idea that, well, who's arguing for whatever balancing the playing field means? No merit pay at all. Doctors get paid $10 an hour. Anybody suggesting something like that would have to be really, really fucking stupid. Clearly, there's jobs that are more dangerous, jobs that are more difficult, and those people should be paid commensurate to their sacrifice as people, being exposed to diseases or being exposed to the risk of being killed on the job and all that kind of stuff. And it's just silly to say you don't pay people for that trouble, but they should be paid based on the merit of what the job produces. The productivity of the job should decide how much a person gets paid, not how many desperate people are willing to do the job.
And it cannot be made to work.
Yes, it can. You haven't even thought about making it work. I bet you haven't spent 25 minutes of your life writing it down and saying, well, how would I fix it? How would I make it fairer? Because it isn't that complicated to say how you would make it fair. And how would you make it incentivized? How would you make it so people always had an incentive to do a little better, to learn a little bit more, to be a little more expertise?
Because it was invented to work at an angle.
It wasn't invented. It was the default. That's what human beings have always done. So the first king of France, all he was Bill Gates. He was just somebody who acquired a huge amount of ownership, and he ended up being king for it. So that's all it really comes down to. And again, the model of that system is that somehow once you're king, your prodigy stays king. And that's just stupid. Why shouldn't they earn it like everybody else? Why are they privileged in terms of a child? And why should they have some kind of insane head start when we're gonna play a game that basically says, yes, it's about merit. It's about what you acquire as skills and capacities, and your contribution, not what vagina you fall out of. I mean, to say that the human race can't do any better than whose vagina did you fall out of? Yeah, we can do better than that.
That's the simplest way of putting it. There's fuck all anybody can do about it.
So, yeah, let's just all give up. Because we don't have any capacity to think of a better idea than stupid and dumb. We can't do any better than a dumb idea or a stupid idea.
This is why no politicians can work, because it can't.
So the only reason why the politician thing doesn't work anymore is, again, partly because we have exaggerated the rich man, poor man thing. And the importation of poverty is just going to make that worse and worse. And so all there is dumb people who are selfish and are going to keep voting for gimme, 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 and smart people who are greedy and selfish and are just going to keep voting for what's in it for me. How rich can it make me? And there's nobody in the middle who just wants to see other people be as productive as they are. It's almost like it'd be better if you just said people who aren't productive, that is, they haven't gone to work and produced something, none of those people should vote.
Not work. Okay, in a little island like Singapore, you can just about keep something going, or Liechtenstein, or something like that, where you can.
So what's the difference? There's no difference. Saying the scale matters is kind of silly. 1 million, or 2 million, or 10 billion, it's all the same thing. The scale isn't the problem. It's the quality of the democracy, you could argue. And the people who are smart enough to know that they don't want to live in a debt-run system, and they don't want to live in a system that just sees exploitation everywhere.
Create the imbalances necessary to make money and capitalism work.
So again, capitalism never will work because the incentives are wrong. The incentive isn't to help civilization. The incentive is to acquire wealth, and it's, you know, those two things, those roads don't go the same way.
But in, say, the European community, or what is it called, EU, whatever, European Union,
You'd think you would know since you're living in it.
or something like, or the United States, or anybody that tries to balance up things, like voting in that new Maldani or whatever his name, mayor in New York.
Oh yeah, so that guy is out. So again, that was a terrible example because it's exactly the problem. Okay, there's way too many poor people voting for silly people who are going to promise them everything and deliver nothing.
We all know, whether we know it in the front of our head or the back of their head, that trying to take money from the rich and give it to the...
Well, he won't be able to do any of it, so it just doesn't make any difference. But regardless, it depends on how rich the rich are and how poor the poor are. So again, those arguments to some extent are valid in the sense that there's obviously a point where a person's wealth is not going to be, them becoming wealthier isn't going to be of any benefit to the civilization. And the fact is the civilization does have a lot of wretched refuse, dysfunctionals, people who aren't going to be able to be productive to take care of, and that's just a fact. And so until we're smart enough to say, well, let's try to minimize the number of dysfunctionals, you know, let's maybe tell people they can't just recklessly have kids that they don't even have any clue how to educate or to civilize. Yeah, that's a big mistake. I mean, again, these, you know, there's foreigners that come here, and I see them every day talking their native language to their kids in America, and that's just asking for failure.
Or will not work. I've just simplified it for you to say why it doesn't work, because
the other side doesn't work either. So again, the problem is how do we migrate one of these idiotic parties back to some rational middle instead of being trapped in special interests and owing a bunch of special interests. But yes, how do you get elected and do that? That's the tricky part. It seems to me there's lots of rooms for them to move to the middle, because the other sides always look so much worse that you don't have to even run much of a candidate. I mean, frankly, the candidates were absolutely horrible. You know, they couldn't come up with something a little better than these creatures. I mean, they're all just crooks right on their face.
Nothing flows then. It just becomes stagnant pond.
All right, well, that's, you know, that's not going to be an issue in this circumstance, because New York isn't, you know, it's not the productivity capital of the world. I don't even know what it is about it. I mean, it's so dysfunctional in so many ways and so inefficient. You have to argue why people bother.
It just doesn't work. You can't do that. Life, as, what did my mother say? When I say it's not fair, life isn't fair. It's not meant to be fair. It's not designed to be fair.
So again, it's just silly. It's not designed to be anything. I mean, obviously, if we were designed to be Tyrannosauruses and we got educated, we would change our behavior. We'd stick our pinkies out with our little cups, and you know, we'd figure out how to drink with a straw and do all kinds of things, and we try to, you know, do something about you know, our instincts and our impulses, you know, to, you know, bite. Just like a pet has to become civilized, and we can do it. So it's just bullshit to make this argument that somehow we're not meant to be capable, you know, when we have the brain to do it. Doesn't matter what our brain exists for. It doesn't matter what it's there for. You know, it might be there just to be a scheming, evil, selfish scheming tool. That might be how it got here. Doesn't mean that's what we have to do with it. There's no rule against humans being smart, decent, reasonable. Yeah, reasonable. There's nothing stopping them except some kind of perception that somehow, well, if I make the system fair, I lose. And if somebody has that perception, they should have the sophistication to know, wait a minute, yeah, what's more important, fairness or me losing? And obviously fairness is more important. That's the baby. The bathwater is your petty self-interest.
But the old capitalism worked on that principle that things weren't equal, and you played the unfairness game and played it hard. And as long as lots of people played the unfairness game, capitalism can work.
So again, he's saying it works. Slavery works, and it's just an evil statement, because it only works if you're not the slave. It only works if if you're not the victim. You know, war works as long as you don't have to go and get killed, horribly. Well, yeah, that works great. I sit here, somebody else goes to war, dies and fights and does all this pain and suffering thing, and I enjoy watching it on TV. What the fuck? But that's not a rational perception.
It's dynamic. Try and put fairness into, or civilization, you can say, into the game, and it stops.
So it really doesn't. So that's just silly. So fairness is merit pay. That's not going to kill the game. Fairness is saying, well, you really don't have automatic privilege based on what vagina you fall out. So you're going to get some privilege. We can't stop all of it, but we can certainly stop you from inheriting $1 billion. We can stop that from happening. Gigantic head starts. Play in a real arena. Again, the corruption of it, the whole capitalist system is ruined, by this frivolous wealth generation. So even, Google, as bad as Google is itself, the people who engineered it, there's all kinds of evidence that they start businesses, that have, not like a genetic, company. And the fact is, they do the same thing. They have so much money, they don't have to make money the first 10 years. So they get into an industry and basically weed out everybody who's a little bit weak, because they can give it all away. And so they reduce their competition and make it so much easier for them to win.
And this is what we've had over the last however, since the Second World War, trying to make it all nice and fair, nice.
Right, so that hasn't been happening. You say it, but it really hasn't. And you could argue that in the 60s and 70s, they had a pretty good approach. I mean, there was a pretty high tax bracket, but the rich weren't being wiped out. There was plenty of rich people. They just weren't obscenely wealthy. And there was a huge, giant middle class. That's a fact. And there was poor people, but they were manageable. And now what do you have? You got systems that aren't even close to being manageable in terms of taking care of the people who don't have.
Basically, it does.
You got people pooping in the streets in cities, and all kinds of terrible stuff that didn't happen. So obviously something changed to make that happen.
Not work. And obviously the last 15 years has been...
well, the last 15 years is exactly the last 15 years from the big debt crisis, the mortgage failure. And what we've done in the last 15 years is go right back into the same exact system of perpetual growth, and this idea that everybody's investments should constantly make them richer. That you don't have to work, you just have to own. No need to do any work. Just, buy a house and get rich.
Yes, but we haven't quite made it fair enough. Let's make it even more fair. Micromanage the fairness of it all.
So where's the evidence of this? I'm sorry, I don't see any evidence of this micromanagement. The only thing I've seen in the last 10 years is this turnover where all of a sudden the Democrats became pro-excess labor and let's destroy the wage base. And so we import all these people who can't speak the language, lots of dysfunctionality, very expensive to maintain them, and then they have a bunch of kids that they can't pay for. And so the whole thing is an infrastructure disaster. Whose idea was it? It wasn't some idea. It wasn't somebody who thought through and said, what's a great idea? It's just sloppy Puro thoughts.
And all you're doing is just flattening out the last ripples, and all you're doing is ironing out.
They're just saying there's no evidence of any ironing out. The rich are getting richer every fucking day. So the wealth disproportion is just getting larger and larger. So there's no evidence of any balancing act. None whatsoever. I mean, the Democrats get back in office and they don't undo tax cuts. They don't fix anything. And then the Republicans just create more of them. Then the Democrats get back in, and they don't fix that. They don't undo any of the gigantic tax breaks, because raising taxes is difficult to do.
The system, and the flat system is a dead system. Life is not meant to be fair.
All right. So again, he said it a second time. So what does that have to do with it? Life didn't mean to create us. Life wasn't supposed to be intelligent, as most of the life on Earth proves. It's not supposed to know what the game is, and it's not supposed to do better than the game, and it's not supposed to even try to do better than the game, and blah, 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 blah. That's all just baby talk. And it's just an insult to your goddamn intelligence. Because, frankly, anything that's broken can be fixed. Anything.
What can I say to finish this off? We'll all suffer together. We will all suffer together.
Well, whatever that even means, too. You think it's going to be even, the suffering? You think it's really going to happen in some way where we'll all get our fair share? I mean, what a pile of crap.
Because we'll bang across the spectrum of left, right, up, down, this wild idea, that wild person, all these sorts of ideas. But we're too ingrained now with civilization, decadent civilization.
So the point is that civilization is great in the sense that we have all this industry, we have all these farmland, we have all of the resources necessary, and all we have to understand is that if we have some kind of crisis, we just have to keep all those things running. We have to keep making peanuts. We have to keep making, sugar and all of the necessities, bread making and this and that. All this stuff has to keep happening, and then everything will be okay. You just have to wait it through, have the final resolution of the bankruptcy, and figure out, some start over system, and just start over. Get a job, do some work, create some value, and live a better life.
Civilization, this idea of fairness. Until the idea of fairness goes.
So again, he's saying the idea of fairness doesn't mean that merit pay. It doesn't mean, that you pay somebody for 8 hours of work, a minimum standard of living wage kind of thing. All of that does work, frankly, and it's just silly to say it doesn't work. Giving everybody everything isn't going to work. Okay. Homeless people can't have mansions and yachts.
And unfairness and vicious nastiness comes back in. We are all in the same fucked boat.
So I don't even know what that means. We're all in the same fucked boat, because we're not. Just a fact. Some of us are lucky. I have a roof over my head. I'm not going to be homeless tomorrow. So, yeah, it'll take them a little while to make me homeless. So I have some cushion. There's lots of people who don't have $10. I mean, they can't afford, taxes to go up $500. They can't afford any of that stuff.
Is that fair? To be all fucked? Yes, I suppose it is.
Well, whatever. It's a joke and a fantasy, because that ain't how it happens.
We're all fucked together.
Global warming is going to fuck a lot of rich people and poor people. So, yeah, when the tidal waves hit and that kind of stuff, yeah. But the economic collapse is going to hit the least of the people a lot harder than the cushioned wealthy.
It's fair. The brilliance of human intellect has invented a system to fuck absolutely everybody.
Well, again, you're saying the human system, the human. No, you can find the failures. You can find what kind of bad judgment, was the factor that decided. And the idea is that every citizen, every person born as a human being has to understand that they're part of this whole thing, and your contribution has to be, you have to be accountable for your contribution, and that's the part that everybody's just lost sight of, and now it's just the us's and them's, and that's all people see. I mean, they don't see the civilization as being the precious thing.
Barely. But just always remember, I'll just finish with that. Just remember that a 2-year-old, or even a younger than a 2-year-old, I believe, I'm not sure about this, comes out with, "It's not fair, it's not fair." It's such a basic baby sort of idea.
Right, so just a silly thing to say. The reason why little kids can figure it out is because it is so essential to the function of the machine. It's the racetrack argument again. What's the point? Why have the fucking race if you're going to have cheaters all over the track? What's the point of it? We don't let cheaters in the Olympics. We don't let cheaters in all our sports. Are all well-mannered because, people can't get away with this cheating crap. So, why shouldn't we have the same idea that we need very strong and useful referees in our civilization?
And we've now let that basic sort of baby idea dominate.
Alright, so just a joke. There's absolutely no dominating anywhere. There's absolutely no evidence of any dominating. Again, the rich are getting richer. Even the slope of their richness line is probably going even the velocity of that line is probably even greater than it was 10 years ago. They're getting richer faster than they were 10 years ago. It's just such a lie to say that the left has done anything to fix anything, because all they've done is create insane liabilities by what's their only policy? Somehow defend immigration. What else do? They don't do a damn thing otherwise. Where are they proposing any social improvement? Even when they decide to subsidize something, they don't subsidize it directly. They subsidize a bunch of capitalist companies and say, well, my friend owns a solar panel company. My friend owns a windmill company. They're just grafting too. So it's just all graft. They're just hiring capitalists to do it. They can't. What did they do to NASA? They turned NASA into this stupid Muska. You think Muska's going to do anything? Well, sorry if you think so. Anything for a reasonable price. No way. So, but what's the great accomplishment of the fairnessers in terms of doing anything about the huge disparity between the rich and the poor? Oh, that's right. They haven't done a damn thing.
Absolutely everything. Condemning us all to
And with this, as he sits in his nice polytunnel on his nice, south of France estate. Oh God, what a tragedy. Don't you have it so bad? It's just so funny. The poor people are just rampaging your place, aren't they? Yeah, they're just sucking all the blood out of your house. Out of you in the house. Yeah, silly liberals. Alright, anyway. Oh, he's just such a jerk. So I tried to post a comment on his video, but I guess he has me blocked now or something. I mean, I rarely comment, and it's just kind of funny that he felt the need to make our disconnect so permanent. So he'll talk to AIs all day, right? He'll talk to some stupid Wikipedia regurgitating device, a pop culture regurgitation device, and they can't think. It really can't reason, can't do any of those things. All it can do is say, what's a popular way to respond to your question. That's all it's going to do. It's just going to find a popular way to do it. Some popular jargon, and that's it. It's not going to come save the day. It's not going to make this video and talk about innovative ideas that might solve a problem. It's not going to talk about that. It's not going to say something like, well, why don't you stop paying teachers and pay the kids instead? I mean, that's a real capitalist idea, right? I mean, you want the kids to learn. Well, they're the ones you should incentivize, frankly. The boring, stupid, redundant, performing artist teachers are useless in this circumstance. With all this technology, the teachers are useless. You can videotape the best teacher in America, and every kid in America can watch the videotape. What do we need the teachers for? Don't need them. What do we need the building for? Don't need it. None of that crap. Okay, it's all waste. Insane waste, frankly. Stupid waste. All right. I guess we'll call that a video. And such, and so forth and whatnot. So, till the next time, blah, 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 blah. It's enough for this video. Maybe I'll make another video. We'll see how I feel. Yeah, whatever.